Do you know this piece? Richard Wagner's Meistersinger von Nürnberg. Can you feel this with AI? No, because what you feel right now, the pulse of the music, the vibration in your chest, no algorithm can replace that. And for us musicians, there's something even deeper. The joy of creating, the happiness of shaping sound together, that is human. In Meistersinger, Wagner stages a contest, strict rules on one side, free inspiration on the other. And he asks, what makes true art? Perfect technique or human expression? Today, this question returns, not between two composers, but between human and machine. Because AI can already invent melodies, imitate voices, even generate complete songs or films, sometimes impressive, sometimes strange. It opens up new creative spaces. At the same time, it raises questions. Who is the author? What happens to jobs, and what knowledge of culture is missing from algorithms trained only on data, decided by a small group of people? And it's not only about aesthetics. A global study by CISAZ, the International Confederation of Societies of Authors and Composers, published in 2024 warns. By 2028, musicians could lose almost a quarter of their income, while the market for AI-generated music grows from 3 to 64 billion euros. These are projections, of course, but they show what is at stake if no clear rules are set. At the same time, AI can lower barriers. Young artists without money for a studio can now produce songs on a phone. That is democratization, but also disruption. I often get asked, how do you reach a high level on your instrument? The answer is simple, basics. Scales, breathing, rhythm, practiced again and again for years. And I believe culture works the same way. Culture is one of our basics, something we must practice, protect, and refine every single day. So let me finish with this. AI can generate sound, but culture is practice, shared action, meaning, joy. Don't forget culture when we celebrate technology. Don't forget culture when we count billions. Don't forget culture when we talk about AI. Because culture belongs to us. Thanks.
We often talk about a gender gap in tech, in leadership, in development, in data. But there's a more invisible gap emerging, a gap in AI use. And that's dangerous, because AI isn't just a tool anymore. AI is performance, productivity, AI is speed. In short, AI is the ace up your sleeve, but half of the world is missing out. Research shows that there's a gender gap in AI use among professionals worldwide. Women use AI less. So me and my amazing professor, Caroline Fleischmann, and I thought, okay, but what happens if we level the playing field? So we surveyed over 900 business students worldwide. Same age, same major, same access to AI tools, and we even gave them the same task as part of a graded coursework. And still, women use AI significantly less. But why? Well, first of all, what actually predicts AI use? You might think it's tech affinity, right? Tech affinity, AI use. Okay, and the thing is, men showed higher tech affinity, but it didn't have any effect on AI use. So we wondered, maybe it's social encouragement. Social encouragement is the feeling that the people around you, like your boss, your colleague, your coworkers, encourage, support, or even expect you to use AI. Once again, men showed higher perceptions of social encouragement, but it had no effect on AI use. What did matter was perceived usefulness. So basically, if you think AI makes you more productive, you're more likely to use it. Kind of makes sense, right? But here's the thing. Men viewed AI as way more useful than women. But now here's our main finding. In our data, more AI use led to a better grade, but only for men. So this isn't just a usage gap anymore, it's a productivity gap, right? And of course, we need to collect more data and explore this even more, but there's already research that shows that men tend to experiment more with AI, and also they tend to be more confident when they use AI. And this leads to better output. So men are not just using AI more, they're also gaining more benefits from it. And this isn't just a problem for women, right? Because this effect will compound over time. Better grades and better performance will lead to more job opportunities, promotions, leadership roles, entire careers. As I said, it's not just a problem for women. It's a loss for companies, for the economy, and for innovation. And actually, it's kind of scary that we already see this effect in the student sample, right? And AI is going to be the next frontier across every single sector. So what do we do now? To all the policymakers in the room, we got to start early. AI needs to be taught in school. We need AI literacy, AI fluency, and AI confidence. To all the managers in here, your job isn't just to roll out AI tools, it's to make sure that everyone perceives them as useful. Not just part of your team, everyone. And how do you do that? How do you change perceptions? Well, first of all, training that's relevant and practical, and also that fosters confidence. And you get to lead by example. And lastly, to all the researchers in here, there's so much more that we need to uncover. Because if we don't close the gap, we're leaving so much potential behind, not just for the economy, but for society. Thank you very much.
So first of all, as a young person standing in front of you, there's not much I can tell you that you might not already know. But what I can do is share my experience and my take on what that means for responsibility. Flashback 3 years. I'm sitting at a small desk on the outskirts of the Nairobi River in Kenya, excited for the 80 kids waiting outside to be treated. I'm a bit nervous because this is the project I'd started funding from Germany. But what I didn't expect was that kid handing me a notebook scribbled with details instead of a medical record. What I wasn't expecting at all was the fact that the training I'd been taking and doing did not help me in diagnostics and treatment. Flash forward 2 years, I'm standing in the hallway of a very nice building in Switzerland, the private ward of a hospital, crisp white doctor's coat on. A 75-year-old lady hands me her 160-page medical record. And while I briefly skim the first page, I think of the 20 patients I still have to cover rounds on. Now, what is the problem for me? If we look at Kenya, we have a lack of representative data. This means ethnic, geographic, but also gender, leading to a bias. This was referenced by my colleague today, Emma, but also by the head of the Ministry of Health in Bavaria. Second of all, scarce resources and weak infrastructure. This leads to preventable diseases and death. And third of all, political and humanitarian instability, making it really hard to plan long term. Now, on the other side, we have Europe, representative for industrialized nations, as we call them. There, our huge problem is demographic change. Almost every fourth person you see in Germany is above the age of 65. But the number of doctors isn't increasing proportionally. Second of all, documentation. If you're a doctor on the internal medicine ward of a hospital, you spend about 70% of time on the computer. That means less time with a patient, and that means less opportunity to individualize medicine. And third of all, clinical trials exclude older, multimorbid, and female patients. This is leading to a reproducibility crisis, which means most of the patients we have don't actually fit the picture, making it very difficult to focus on making medicine precise, something we're trying to do really hard here. Altogether, we see a high risk for error, both in personal and systemic decision-making. Now, how could AI contribute to the solution? The question is not if AI is changing healthcare, it already is. It's helping us read X-rays, it's helping us predict sepsis, but we need to do so much more in the future. First take is representative data. 80% of genomic data is European. but we make up 5% of the world population. In our case, that includes gender and so many gaps we've already referenced. This leads to a bias, underscoring our globe. And we need to find error detection and error correction. Second of all, open source data. This has also been referenced today by the cabinet. This is important, but we need to understand which data to open source and where we get our data from. Next of all, explainability. We need to understand how AI is talking to us. Potential there is chain of thought. And last but not least, decision support. In low-income countries, that means resource allocation and distribution. In high-income countries, that means finding a way to sift through these 160 pages and take out the most important parts. Now, chain of thought, RAG, and evals are signal words we already have in AI, something we can already facilitate and use in the system. Responsibility is not optional. What moral dilemma do we face? If we just use Western data, and not just any Western data, but rather data that does not include old people, does not include females, we don't represent our society. This is a high risk of increase for misdiagnosis. If we use poor quality data, we risk eroding trust. If we don't hold ourselves accountable, we need to make sure AI is integrated with a human-in-the-loop concept so we can better integrate doctors and the system. And we need to discuss the fear of data safety. That's very relevant in Germany, but not just for us. This is a transnational problem. Again, responsibility is not optional. AI's ability to optimize workflow, contextualize health, and transform incomplete data is undeniable for life-saving insights. But if we ignore inequity, we fail not just morally, but strategically. Healthcare is not a side gig. It makes up 13% of the GDP in Germany. It's a moral duty and an economical imperative. The pandemic made it clear, disease does not stop at country borders. Threats won't stop. For example, the tiger mosquito is now spreading in Stuttgart. This mosquito originated from Asia and can transmit 20 diseases that we don't really know here yet, like chikungunya and dengue, which are quite rare in our area. This means if we don't invest now, the financial, health, and social burden will become much stronger and larger in the future. Gathered here today, from research to economy to policy, I talk to you directly. You have the power to make sure that AI is used responsibly in healthcare all the time and in the future. Thank you so much.
After the next 5 minutes, I promise to you that this title will make a little more sense. So what I want to do is to share the similarities that I see between quantum physics and our everyday world and life. And I want to use the language of quantum physics to articulate a vision for our world with AI. So, without further ado, let's start with something that's hopefully familiar to most of you, and that's the classical world. We live in a very complex digital world. However, when you start breaking down this complex world into its most fundamental building blocks, what you'll find is that those building blocks are actually surprisingly simple. So when you zoom into your computers and your smartphones, what you'll end up seeing are sequences of zeros and ones, sequences of bits, the smallest units of information. Now, I invite you in to join me in the quantum world. And here we also try to build computers, quantum computers. But the fundamental building blocks look very different. In fact, we try to build objects which not only can represent zeros and ones, but everything and anything in between. And we call these objects qubits. And they can be in those very exotic states, which we call superposition. So a qubit can be 50% white, 50% blue, but it could also be 70-30 or 99 and 1. And qubits behave very oddly, but also beautifully, I think. And I want to give you a couple of examples and draw some parallels to everyday life. So when we are in our labs as physicists and we have our qubits, beautiful combinations, superpositions, and we take a look, what happens might seem a little bit disappointing because we only see blue and white, zeros and ones. But that is one of the core principles of quantum physics, that the observation, the act of measurement itself, no longer is a passive activity, but a proactive and impactful action. And I think that also applies to our life. Because agents, be it people, be it collectives, or even digital agents, behave very differently when they know they're being watched at times. So measurement, observation is a very important tool for us. But measuring itself is not the only thing that affects the state of my qubit. In fact, I want to share this oddity with you, because I can ask a qubit, are you blue or are you white? And push it into either state. But I could also ask, do you have a pattern or are you plain? And push it once again in either state. And so to put it more simply, the questions we ask as physicists and as human beings shape the answers we get. So we have to be very mindful of that, because we tend to see what we are looking for. Now, what we are looking for, that's a good point. When it comes to our world, I want to invite you into a little Gedankenexperiment. But before I do that, maybe you have another question. You might be wondering, is there another rule to this pushing around of the qubit, to this bullying, so-called? Yes and no, once again. Because there are probabilities, meaning if I have a 50-50 qubit, it will be with a 50% probability in one state, 50% probability in the other state. But here's another thing, another, and the last one, I promise, another parallel between quantum physics and the real world. We carry a burden and a privilege of uncertainty. But what we always can do, and what we always have, is the power to tilt the odds. We can increase probabilities, change the state, such that at the end, when we look at what we want to measure, we get the outcome we want to see. Now I want to ask you the same question. Imagine the world is one gigantic qubit in a superposition of all possible scenarios with a world with AI. Good, bad, everything in between. Now, as human beings, we naturally ask the question, well, which one is the best state? But as a physicist, I also want to encourage you to ask the question, what measurement do we need? Or which questions do we need to ask in the first place to get the outcome that we want to observe? So is it measuring productivity, measuring innovation, novelty? Good possibilities. But I think we just heard a common thread, a red thread, through all of the 3 wonderful talks we've just had. And that is the thread of human well-being. Most importantly, human dignity. Be it by experiencing and allowing these experiences of beauty and creation and self-efficacy, and not only having them, but sharing them with one another, so that we can partake in and shape a culture and a society. Be it with Emma, not only distributing resources, but making sure that these resources are being used for individuals to develop capabilities and move autonomously in this beautiful world. But not always beautiful, we have to keep that in mind. But we can change what we see. And then, most importantly, because it's foundational for every other experience, health and bodily integrity, making sure that everyone here has the highest degree possible of health and bodily integrity. So I believe the question we need is AI in service of human dignity? So I want to leave you with one last call to action, and that is the following. Wherever you are right now, and wherever you go, I hope that this image is the source of inspiration for you, that you allow it to be, and that every action you take is one that tilts our odds, making sure that at the end, when we take one big final look, one final measurement of the world, what we most likely see is a world in which AI and all of technology has been in service of human dignity. Thank you very much.